Hello, and welcome to What's the Story, a short podcast from Light Reading exploring the biggest topics impacting the telecom industry, where we dive into one main story to tell you the latest news, why it matters, and what to expect next. I'm Nicole Ferraro, an editor at Light Reading, and I'm here with another editor at Light Reading, the great Jeff Baumgartner. Say hello, Jeff.
Hello, everybody, and hello, Nicole. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
Good. Yeah, just still kind of buried into the subject of what we're going to get into today.
Yeah. And that's a great time to force you to be on video and make sense of it when you're buried in the midst of the subject at hand. So apologies. But as Jeff teed up here today, we're going to discuss the recent news that EchoStar will sell a chunk of its spectrum to AT&T for $23 billion. We're going to get into the main news so far in terms of what we know about this deal, broader implications for the companies involved and the industry at large, and what to expect next. Jeff has been doing some excellent reporting on this alongside some of our other Light Reading colleagues, and we'll link to all of those stories in our show notes. And I should say that we're speaking the day after this deal was announced. This podcast will run, like 4 or 5 days from now. So things may happen in the meantime that Jeff cannot speak about, but we'll get that into the show notes if further developments happen before then. But anyway, to start off, Jeff, can you give us the basic background on the news that AT&T is going to buy EchoStar's low and midband spectrum? What is it buying exactly? For what purpose? And what do we know about the deal so far?
Yeah, so I found this on my phone at like 6 in the morning.
Yeah, by the way, I know. When I wake up in the morning
today,
when I wake up in the morning and see you've already filed a press release for copy edit and you're 2 hours behind me, that's concerning. But
kind of like, all right, I guess breakfast can wait. Yeah, so like anything and everything that involves EchoStar, this is a very tangled and complicated thing, EchoStar and Charlie Ergen just don't do easy. As you mentioned up front, the core thing is that AT&T is buying some of Dish's mid-band and low-band spectrum for $23 billion.
Mm-hmm.
And tied in, there's this enhanced wholesale agreement whereby EchoStar's Boost business is going to be a lot more closely tied to AT&T, and then EchoStar is going to be decommissioning its network and transitioning to this hybrid MNO construct where they'll use their 5G core network and run on the AT&T network. So when you kind of put all that together, EchoStar's dream of being the fourth facilities-based carrier is dashed. So that's kind of been one of the things that kind of comes out of this. But we have a little bit of time before all this comes together. The closing looks like they're targeting like mid 2026. So plenty of time for people to bark about it and wring their hands and all that good stuff.
Yeah. And we'll get into the potential barking a little bit later and whether or not that'll actually have any impact. But I think your reporting or maybe somebody else's story on our site mentioned that the White House was involved in wanting this to happen. Do we have that as well? Anything about that?
Yeah. So going back to the tangled, convoluted parts of this, there was some political intrigue here because this transaction comes about after or amid pressure that's still ongoing from the FCC, this probe into EchoStar's 5G build out and its spectrum licenses. And then well before this all came about, the deal actually happened. There were reports that President Trump stepped in to relay something to the effect that the FCC needs to make sure that or ensure that EchoStar doesn't end up in bankruptcy because maybe that's a bad look. So and meanwhile, there was a lot of talk about Chairman Carr of the FCC saying, the status quo can't stand as it is, and to kind of maybe press for some spectrum sales, which happened. So meanwhile, EchoStar has been in some financial trouble, delaying payments that put it on the edge of bankruptcy. And then in the recent Q2 filing, they reiterated or resurfaced that the company's ability to continue as a going concern was in doubt. So, so now they have, if this deal goes through, they have some financial runway, and then related, and meanwhile, they have this $5 billion direct-to-device low Earth orbit project that they've put out there, and I think at the time there was some head scratching because it's like, okay, you're saying you're about to go bankrupt because of all the, but yet let's put this $5 billion project in motion. And they would say, well, when it comes to space, we can't really wait on things. So,
okay.
So,
pretty straightforward and
going on there.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about some of the implications then. I think there are implications here for, every potential entity involved and not involved. So obviously, in terms of why this was the right move for EchoStar, I think you just spoke to that a bit in terms of they've been threatening bankruptcy and warning about their own finances for a while, but feel free to say more about that. But in terms of why this was the right move for AT&T, and for both companies, from investor standpoint and analyst standpoint, would love to hear a little bit about that. And what impact is this likely to have on, T-Mobile and Verizon, for example, as well as cable operators? Let's start there. That's enough of a beginning chunk in terms of implications.
Oh yeah, right. Because there are kind of wide-ranging implications for this. For EchoStar, they get a financial lifeline, even if they don't get to be this facilities-based MNO that they were trying to be. And then it's also sparked speculation that this is just the start of Dish selling off all of its spectrum. So if that goes forward, yes, I think we'll end up seeing AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile taking a pretty close look at that. Maybe Starlink, that they've had their eyes on the 2 gigahertz spectrum. I think, this would normally be Mike Dano's area. He was kind of our spectrum guy, but hey, he's over at Ookla now doing the same thing. But
yes, and still chiming in on this subject if you want to go.
He had plenty to say. Yeah, it's like old habits.
Keep that guy quiet.
So, but you had mentioned cable, right? And there are implications
there. Your area.
Yeah. So I think one implication has to do with competition because AT&T is going to use the spectrum to expand and deepen its fixed wireless access capability with the Internet Air product. And they've been using that mostly to kind of not as aggressively as Verizon or T-Mobile, but they've been using it to catch copper customers and kind of hit areas before they can bring fiber out there. But I guess this is the way they talk about is it's going to allow them to be a little more aggressive because it opens up capacity that they didn't have access to. So they're still very fiber focused, AT&T, but this really strengthens their fixed wireless strategy. So it'll be interesting to see how that shapes up as AT&T gets the deal done. And they were even saying, John Stankey, that there's a possibility they can start to light this up, at least on the midband side, before the deal even closes. And then on the other hand, I think Roger Entner did a really good job, taking and looking at all the angles. But he pointed out that this also could help the cable industry in a way because it'll strengthen their position in the MVNO negotiations. Particularly, there's the scuttlebutt that Comcast and Charter's residential MVNO agreements with Verizon are subject to like a new round or a new wave of negotiation, and that is coming about after T-Mobile stepped in and got the business focused MVNO business with Comcast and Charter. So so I think it adds to some of the intrigue, and kind of what's going to happen because Charter and Comcast, of course, from an MVNO standpoint, have been pretty successful. In terms of just scaling that part of the business.
And beyond the operators we're talking about, our colleague Ian also has a story up about how this is going to impact Dish's radio access network, its RAN vendors, and the concept of Open RAN overall. I think he rightfully writes that Dish was really the operator in the U.S. that was going all in on Open RAN. And so it sounds like this will impact AWS, Fujitsu, Mavenir, Samsung, and Wind River from Ian's reporting so far, at least. I think they were
banking on it. Yeah, I think they were definitely banking on this, even though I think AT&T has been on the Open RAN bus. I don't know if it's quite a train, but I'm sure Ian would have. Ian's had some criticism about AT&T's positioning there, but it's definitely a blow in a way to some of those suppliers.
For sure. And before we move on to, the what's next of it all, just in terms of any other implications, has the FCC, as of our speaking, said anything yet in terms of what this might mean for its investigation? And, just in general, obviously, this was an attempt to create a fourth facilities mobile operator. It has failed. Any thoughts on what that means overall for the country?
I think the last time I looked around, like what Chairman Carr had put on his X or his Twitter or whatever you want to call it.
Whatever.
I haven't seen anything yet. I haven't looked in a little while. I think from some of the reactions I've seen, it seems like the expectation is there's not going to be major pushback from the FCC, particularly since what is happening here seems to fall pretty well in line with what Chairman Carr wants for Dish to shed some of its spectrum on the argument that they're not putting it to great use during a time when access to spectrum and they're trying to free up spectrum as it is, and there's not a lot to have. And I don't have a good feeling on how the antitrust aspect will shake out, but I think that there will be some opposition. I did speak to Peter Adderton, who runs MobileX, which is an MVNO, and he was the guy who used to run Boost, the U.S. business there. Mm-hmm. And I'll have a story about it. I'm not sure if it'll be up here by the time this gets up there, but he's got some pretty big concerns about how this agreement will impact the MVNO's sector ability to compete and scale. So he's going to be asking the FCC to adjust some rules on pricing and some other things to help position the MVNOs better in this market, this environment. And then interestingly, he also brought up, again, in a way, this notion of an open access regime for cables, Wi-Fi networks and the fixed networks. Mm-hmm. It's saying, hey, we need to be on even footing and be able to sell to the same people that the cable operators are doing. Open access is a model that we're seeing a little bit of momentum in the U.S. I think Gigapower JV is a recent example, but I'm sure even the thought of that idea would put a scare into the cable operators. But then again, is it far-fetched? Because there's a mandate in Canada to do that exactly the exact thing. And I'm sure the cable operators here are kind of watching that one super closely. And then Peter was also pretty adamant that in his view, this is like the last final opportunity to fix what's wrong with the MVNO sector. And if there aren't changes, he's kind of threatening to like wash his hands of the whole thing. I'm not sure how serious to take that, but he did sound pretty determined. So, we'll have to see where that goes. But yeah, he's been pretty vocal. I mean, he's been pretty critical of how EchoStar has been managing the boost business to begin with. It's kind of like, look what they've done to my baby, But he's been pretty critical of that, and he's pretty critical of this agreement now, and kind of feeling that in a way EchoStar is kind of getting off the hook here.
Yeah. Okay. So you kind of touched on some of this, I think, in what you were just speaking about. But in terms of, what's next, this is a long process. It'll be next year when this gets approved. And obviously, you said AT&T could implement some of the spectrum beforehand. But what are you going to be watching for as this unfolds over the next year? And what are some remaining open questions you have about this very simple topic?
Yeah. It's simple, Simon. Yeah. I think one thing will be keeping an eye on how AT&T's the way they're characterizing this in terms of the build out. The CEO John Stankey had said, well, the midband is pretty much a slam dunk for them. It should be pretty easy for them to get that deployed, lit up, and so forth. And then it could take years to get the low band portion of it deployed because the network's not really set up to do that right now. But as he pointed out, there are some build out requirements on that spectrum. So how does the FCC look at that? Probably pretty favorably, because Stankey on his talk yesterday just was falling all over himself about how great this administration is to the telecom industry, and he doesn't recall things ever being so good.
Awesome.
So he's saying all the things.
Did he say that in front of the presence of federal troops, or I just curious?
Yeah, I don't know. So if he was at gunpoint, at that point, but
was it during a 3-hour?
It was audio only. Yeah, it was audio only. Okay. So I can only speculate. But I think I think for some of the telecom folks in general have been pretty positive about the big beautiful bill, in general, from the tax standpoint and everything. So I think that they're kind of looking favorably at this. But anyway, he just made a big point of it. And then as far as like what I'll be looking for, when the docket opens up, it'll be curious to see what the opposition looks like outside of what Mobile X is sure to do. And I think Peter was also saying, he doesn't want to just do this fight in the filings. I think he wants to get FaceTime with Chairman Carr and express himself that way. So,
well, as long as he still puts up a filing about what happened in that meeting, then it'll still be entertaining for us.
Yeah, we'll have an ex parte or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But and at one point, he threw a coffee cup and smashed it against the wall.
It's not the coffee cup that Ajit Pai used.
That big one, the big Reese's one.
Really dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah, that was like a cauldron. Yeah, that wasn't even a cup. Yeah. So.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you taking this time to explain all of this to us. And we're going to be keeping up with your reporting on this because we need you to help make sense of it. So thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, Nicole. Appreciate it.
All right. Bye.
Bye.